Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I have a very distinguished guest with me, Professor M D Nalapat. Professor Nalapat has just returned from a tour of United States, Sri Lanka and China, all countries that are very important as far as India's security concerns are concerned. To share his experiences as well as where he sees India's security concerns should be, I'd like to welcome Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you, Sri. It's always a pleasure because your channel is doing amazing work in bringing out a lot of very unpleasant facts about very high entities in India, facts that very frankly the media in India tend to stay away from.
Thank you, Professor Nalapat. So let's start with your trip to United States. So you first went to United States, then you went to Sri Lanka, and then you went to China. So how did you see this overall trip at a 20,000-foot level? And then maybe we can start engaging in a little bit more details as things come along.
Well, I'd like to say that I have very long held the view that India diplomatically needs to walk on two legs. One leg is the United States, and the other leg is China. And we need to walk with the US on the defense and security leg, and we need to walk with China on the commercial and business leg. So the point is very simple. If we do not have a China option, then frankly, the United States, which is a very hard bargainer, especially under President Trump, is going to give us a pretty bad bargain when we come asking for a partnership. The Chinese feel that we don't have good relations with the Americans. They're going to try and drive too hard a bargain for our welfare in terms of economics and commerce. So frankly, for a healthy relationship with either the US or China, we need a healthy relationship with both.
So with respect to United States positions, I thought a few months ago, till about a few months ago, their position vis-a-vis Pakistan seemed to be very clear. But I noticed some sand shifting. How do you see US-Pak relationship vis-a-vis India?
Well, I'd like to say that the Americans and the Chinese are together in this, and that both of them, for them, Pakistan is the Pakistan army. I mean, anyone who doesn't wear khaki is not a Pakistani according to the Americans and the Chinese. And the fact of the matter is that the people in khaki are the worst enemies of the people of Pakistan. So unfortunately, the United States' obsession with the military, an obsession it shares with China, is actually damaging not only its own interest, but is helping to prolong the agony of the people of Pakistan who are looking for a day in which the military in Pakistan becomes like the military in the US, China, or India, firmly under civilian control.
So let's expand on that a little bit. From what I have read about Pakistan, most of the industry in Pakistan is essentially tied to the army. Either they are running them or they are involved in some way or the other. And India continues to bestow the most favored nation treaty with Pakistan. And this despite you writing in Jan 2017 about the dangers of ISI fomenting trouble in India on various caste lines and so on and so. Let us set aside Cambridge Analytica for a moment. When you wrote this thing in Jan 2017, you had predicted that there will be a lot of forces at work to try and create and foment trouble in India. So my question to you, sir, is how does, and you've been proved right. Now, the question is, why does India continue to bestow upon Pakistan the most favored nation treaty?
Well, I'd like to say that this most favored nation treaty is bestowed upon a lot of countries, and it really doesn't make much difference if it's not bestowed or bestowed on Pakistan. I think we have to show that we are not like the Pakistan army. We are not as small-minded and petty-minded as they are. In fact, they have deprived India of that particular most favored nation status, but we have given it to them. That's not the big issue. The big issue, quite frankly, is the fact that the ISI and anyone who, for example, has come back from the ISI headquarters, it is obsessed with breaking up India. It's not just revenge for 1971. It's an obsession from 1947 that, look, it's not just enough to have an India and Pakistan. There have to be many Pakistans in India, and there have to be many Hindustans in Hindustan. So from that point of view, they have been working systematically to a plan to ensure that the country breaks up and the country gets divided and the country descends into chaos. Now, I've been pointing this out repeatedly for quite some time, especially after Prime Minister Modi came back. I pointed it out 3 or 4 times. But of course, as is common with most of what I've been pointing out, the fact of the matter is that people don't see, the higher you go, the less people seem to read what I write.
Sir, even as you may express some frustration at Mr. Modi's, hearing what you're saying but not listening, there is a trip coming up. Mr. Modi is going to be in China in this week, as a matter of fact. And I wonder how things are going to be. What exactly is the reason for this trip? And you just came back from China, and there has been some perception that relations are beginning to thaw with China. So how do you perceive, what do you think is the intent of Mr. Modi's trip, and how do you perceive this playing out?
Well, I'd like to point out that Sunday Guardian, in a front page report, has basically revealed a lot of the details of the trip several hours before Sushma Swaraj and Wang Yi did so. I was in Beijing. I was privileged enough to talk to senior people there in the establishment, and they did give me a clear idea, very informally, of course, and not really for publication. But when you talk to someone who's in the media, that's always an occupational hazard, unless you specifically warn that it should not be for publication. And frankly, nobody did that to me, or very few people did that to me. So I got a very clear picture of the trip. The fact is that Xi Jinping has now become a very powerful leader in China. In fact, after Mao Zedong, I think Xi Jinping is the most powerful leader China has had since 1949, even more powerful than Deng Xiaoping. And Xi Jinping, according to the information I have, takes India very seriously. He looks at the computer data, he looks at the calculations, and these calculations say very clearly that even if you have governments that do and continue to do the most stupid things in India, even if you have the most dysfunctional governments in India, even if you have the most corrupt and inefficient civil service in the world in India, even then, frankly, towards the close of the 2020s, India is going to be the 3rd largest country in the world. All this, bad governance can delay it by 6 or 7 years, but it's not going to stop it. So that is a very, very important point, which I think Xi Jinping has understood very clearly, which basically means what? It means that he would like, therefore, to ensure that China and India work out a good relationship. In the future, the US is going to be the 2nd biggest economy in the world. India is going to be the 3rd biggest economy in the world. China will be the biggest economy. If the 2nd and 3rd economies combine against the 1st, not in economics so much as in geopolitics or strategy or other things, it's going to lead to a lot of problems for the top country, which is going to be China. It's much better for China and possibly better for the United States and India, at least that's what many people in China feel, that the US, India, and China, as the 3 biggest countries in the world in terms of economy, should cooperate together, and there shouldn't be a situation that came about during the Cold War when China and the United States combined against the Soviet Union. The Chinese do not want to repeat that history. They don't want India and the US to combine against China the way China and the US combined against the Soviet Union. And therefore, I think Xi Jinping is making it clear that he would like to have a close personal relationship with Prime Minister Modi and discuss with the Prime Minister, who's the head of government in India, what are the big issues of the day. It's not simply, I've been seeing commentary in our media about the border issue and about all kinds of others. Frankly, what the Chinese are looking for is a much bigger canvas, and that's a global canvas. And they're looking for a dialogue to find out what is the Prime Minister's mind on this, what is India's mind on this, so that they can work out a congruence between themselves and India to the extent possible. I repeat, the point about the Chinese is Xi Jinping understands that India is already a global power, and India is going to be a much more important global power. And that is why he has welcomed this opportunity of meeting Prime Minister Modi informally in Wuhan in a few days' time.
That's a wonderful wrap up of what one should expect from Modi's trip to China. And I encourage our viewers and readers to go look up Sunday Guardian, and the headlines are all there about what is probably going to be accomplished. Professor Nalapat, you also stopped by Sri Lanka on your before you went to China. So, how are the relationships between India and Sri Lanka, especially since now China has more or less taken ownership of the Hambantota port and probably area around it?
Look, Sri, the fact of the matter is whether it is the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and I refuse to recognize that part passing through the parts of Kashmir as China-Pakistan economic corridor. I've told the Chinese multiple times it can be called the China-Kashmir economic corridor, but never the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Hambantota Port or CPEC or many of their projects in this region, they're not in Nepal, for example, are not going to make money unless India participates. So far as Hambantota Port is concerned, the Chinese taxpayer can continue to hemorrhage money on the port, then it's never going to make money until India participates. I think the Chinese are even more better businessmen than the British once were, and they understand the value of profit. They understand the dangers of red ink, and therefore I think they have understood very clearly they have to somehow bring India on board on these projects. In the case of Sri Lanka, for example, Hambantota, that's very, very clear. But may I say that I went to Sri Lanka, frankly, on a kind of a personal visit. The former President Rajapaksa and his brother Gotabaya Rajapaksa are friends of mine. And I had a long-standing invitation to go to Sri Lanka, and I took advantage of a gap in my schedule of about 3 or 4 days to go to Sri Lanka, call on President Rajapaksa, meet his son Nemal, who incidentally is a very good rugby player, and meet the members of the Rajapaksa team and have a discussion with them about the future, because it looks very clear that the future of Sri Lanka is again going to be the Rajapaksas.
That's a great wrap up of how you perceive the politics of Sri Lanka. Professor Nalapat, I'm going to jump a little bit here and going to touch on one little thing. When India became independent, we embraced the parliamentary form of government from the British. However, there's one vital thing that we seem to have not done. That is, if you look at England, the opposition also has some sort of a shadow government where specific people are interested with shadowing specific functions of the government. I don't think India has ever imbibed that. Have you? And do you think doing that now, even in the fragmented state the opposition is, would that give for better politics in India?
Look, Sri, the fact of the matter is, whether it is from Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Patel onwards, every Indian politician has clung to the colonial bureaucracy. They have been persuaded by the bureaucracy to retain the colonial rules of the game, colonial laws. In fact, they have added to these colonial laws and made it in some respects hyper-colonial. The UPA did it, and I'm sorry to say the Modi government is also doing it. Prime Minister Modi, when he came into office, took a decision early on. He is going to trust officers, and not just officers, frankly, who are not associated with the previous regime. He is going to assume that the fact that he is Prime Minister and not Manmohan Singh will miraculously change the character of these officials. The same officials who indulged or who helped so many UPA leaders to indulge in blatant corruption, making of billions of dollars, these same officers would then become very pure and work for the nation. Not surprisingly, these officials have instead protected the decisions they made earlier, decisions that involved, frankly, allowing certain people in the UPA to make billions of dollars, with the result that there has been very little accountability at the central level of what happened during the UPA. The Prime Minister himself as a candidate The BJP and the Prime Minister keeps talking about UPA corruption, but not one UPA leader. The only UPA leaders who were sent to jail, the ministers or who were charge-sheeted, were charge-sheeted by a Prime Minister named Manmohan Singh. Not one has been charge-sheeted by Narendra Modi. Not an FIR has been filed. And the reason for that is Modi's decision to trust many of the same officials and give them very high positions. The same officials who are involved in merry money making during the UPA years and during the earlier years. These officials, even today, have very high positions. They've been promoted, they have been cosseted, they have been coddled, and it's therefore small wonder that the Prime Minister is facing a lot of headwinds in implementing his policies.
But surely 4 years have elapsed. By now, he should have realized the bad apples in his basket, don't you think?
Well, I'm not, qualified to speak about Narendra Modi or what Mr. Narendra Modi should do or what he realizes it. My guess is, very frankly, that the Prime Minister is actually part of a triumvirate. It's Narendra Modi, Amit Shah, and Arun Jaitley. These three are actually a unity. It's a Trimurti, which is a unity. So we can't discuss one without the other two. All three fit together. And I think a decision was taken whoever took the lead in that. Sometimes in some issues, Arun Jaitley takes the lead. Sometimes Amit Shah takes the lead. In a lot of decisions, I believe Prime Minister Modi will take the lead. I think a decision was taken that the first 5 years is going to be spent on dealing with politics and trying to ensure that the BJP at the end of 5 years reaches the same position as Jawaharlal Nehru had for the Congress party till the close of the 1950s. So I think the focus has been on politics and not on the administrative reform, not on, frankly, the changes in the system. It's not a question. The current system, very frankly, can go only at a certain pace. It's a jalopy. It's a wreck. It's a colonial wreck dating from about 110 years. A 110-year-old vehicle can't go very fast. We should junk that and set up a new kind of vehicle. It's difficult. It takes a lot of time. It takes effort. Modi could have done it. And by now, that vehicle, in my view, at the end of 4 years, would have started running perfectly. Unfortunately, that was never attempted. So we have still stuck with that 110-year-old jalopy. And even with a person as skillful as Narendra Modi at the wheel, well, that jalopy is just taking this country to what I would call a minimally possible growth rate of around 7%. We need 10, 11, 12% for social stability. We need 9% for survival as a country. And 7% is way below that. Unfortunately, that's all this jalopy is capable of.
I think you hit the nail on the head. So let's just set aside all the politics and the corruption aside. Growth of 10 to 11% is a must for India to avoid social unrest down the road. And with those words, we take leave of Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, thanks for joining PGurus. We'll be back with other topics to discuss in the days and weeks to come.
Thank you, Sri. Thank you very much. And as I said, all power to PGurus and all power to the truth.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day.
Thank you.